The Syracuse chapter of the American Guild of Organists presents A Tale of Two Skinners by Ben Merchant.
I'm out in front of Westminster Presbyterian Church in Auburn, New York. It's a beautiful old, I believe it's granite and brownstone building. We're going to be restoring its Skinner pipe organ. I'll go inside and we'll take a look at it. You'll get a good chance to see what the inside looks like. A really beautiful interior. All right, so I'm in the hallway going into the church. The pastor and one of the committee chairs is here to greet me. I'm gonna do a little bit of a recording. I hope to produce a video of the restoration of the organ. And we're inside Westminster Presbyterian Church, a beautiful church. One of my favorites. This stained glass window is a Tiffany window, a double layer window. And it's one of the most beautiful Tiffany windows I've seen. It's really a very fine example of Tiffany's work. And I'll turn around and look up into the balcony, and there's the Skinner organ. It has a massive facade, you can see. The pipes in the facade are non-speaking pipes, so we'll be taking those out and carefully setting those aside, and that'll also give us entrance and egress into the organ case. And you can see right on the front of the balcony is the top of the console peering up. All right, you can see into the interior of the organ. A lot of the pedal division is on the left side of the case. You can see some of the biggest pedal pipes down here in the corner. It's a little hard to see. Then we can see some more pedal pipes here. This is the treble of the pedal open, and more of the pedal open up here. And you can see the pedal open up at the top there. I'm going to climb up a ladder. I'll climb in a little farther. Okay, I've crawled in underneath one of the pedal chests, and we can see the great division right here. And across, it's a little hard to see in the dark, but across is a door into the swell. The swell is actually at 2 levels. So let me go in and see if there's a light turned on. Yeah, there is. So you can see the swell in here. I'm just gonna take a quick shoot into the swell. You can see the 8-foot trumpet, and in front of that the vox humana. There are 3 other reeds in the organ. It's got the swell is a big swell, has a 16-foot oboe and an 8-foot oboe upstairs, and then above my head in the choir is a 8-foot clarinet, and right here on the side is the pedal 8-foot tuba. You can see some of the boots down at the bottom, and the resonators flare out at the top. And then the 16-foot extension of that, the bottom 12 notes are here on the back wall. It's a little bit hard to see, but it's the bottom octave is wooden, has wooden resonators, and they're mitered 360 degrees because they're too tall just to stand in here by themselves. So I'm up on the top of the ladder. There's a ladder that goes straight up the wall. I'm a fly on the wall here, and you can see some of the pedal pipes. The pedal board and the pedal open are right here. And I'm looking into the choir division. You can see there are actually 2 reeds in the choir division. a French horn, and a clarinet. I forgot about the French horn. And also in the choir division is a harp, which is a most unusual stop. And I'm going to climb in. I'm going to turn this off and climb in and get some photos of that. All right, I've made my way into the choir division. No small feat. And it's a fairly typical choir division. It has an 8-foot dulciana, a 4-foot harmonic flute, an 8-foot concert flute, which is wooden for the bass, and then you can see it goes into a double length at middle C. In front of that is a 2-foot harmonic flute called a piccolo, I believe. And then in front of that is the clarinet, and lastly the English horn. And then if we look over here, we can see the harp stop. And it actually has piano hammers, you can see in there. There are piano hammers that strike metal bars, and each bar has a resonator underneath it. So we'll be rebuilding and releathering all that, which will be a big job. Okay, and then I'm going to work my way across and into the upper choir division. You can see the upper swell division, excuse me, not the choir division. The upper swell division. And that has a flute, a tapered flute, and a flute celeste. I think it's called a dolce flute and a flute celeste. Has a 16-foot board, and the bass pipes are right here on the back wall. You can see the biggest bass pipes are mitered. It has a very soft string, an aileen. The 8-foot flute, I think it's called a stop diapason. And then a 3-rank mixture, which is not original. And then in front of that is the corneau d'amour. And then, no, that's the, excuse me, in front of that is the 16-foot oboe. I believe it's called a fagotto. And then the last row by the walkboard is the 8-foot corneau d'amour, another 8-foot oboe. And then the chimes are against the wall behind the light over there. Skinner's organs are really dense, and they take great care in unpacking and working on them. All right, I'm down in the basement. I found a bulb. There was a light bulb burned out in the blower motor chamber, so that there's a big Spencer turbine with a Century motor, and the motor has been rebuilt by AAI, a company right in Auburn Armature Incorporated, and they have rebuilt the motor, and the static reservoir is right here. You can see the big tube that feeds down into the static reservoir from the blower fan. And there's a big switch here. I believe this is a 3-phase 220 motor. So I'm going to shut that off. And yeah, in fact, there's a sign that says 220 3-phase. And I think we're in pretty good shape. Let me check this to see if that's off, and that's off too. All right, so I'm gonna head back upstairs. All right, we're outside the church and just drove up with our 26-foot rental truck, which is packed with lifts and dollies and mostly crates, ladders, scaffolding. And we're going to be hauling all that into the church. All right, so this is some of the materials we'll be using to disassemble and crate up pipes and parts. We've got a portable forklift. We've actually got 2 of them. This one's lying on its back. And we've got another one over here. And we'll be using those to bring a lot of the heavier pieces up and down over the balcony railing. We've got a couple of ladders, step ladders and extension ladders, packing blankets, and then lumber that we'll be using to set up scaffolding, etc. And then the biggest thing to come off will be the crates. We've got a whole bunch of crates that have to come off. All right, here the guys are bringing in some crates. We've got a mountain of crates to bring in, so they're going to be spread all over the church. Okay, we're looking at all the crates that we brought in. Probably 50 crates or so. All right, here we are looking at the console, and we've got the back and the sides off the console. Skinner consoles are dense with mechanism. So because we're restoring this rather than modernizing it, we have to figure out exactly how everything works. You know, how the switching is set up mostly. And then we can restore it. And Holly is sitting at the console. We've got it turned on, and we're doing things like checking pitch and checking the way the wiring is laid out. We're going to replace most of the wiring. We'll use, this is all cotton covered wire, so we'll use PVC wire. And so we're trying to figure out, Skinner used a complicated system with cutouts so that chess wouldn't play. You wouldn't get any notes playing unless the stop was actually turned on. You wouldn't get any primaries playing, so it makes it quieter and cuts down wear and tear on the chess magnets. But it's a complicated system. And Chris, our foreman, is making notes and measurements. And Holly, our senior partner, is working on stop layout and wiring layouts. All right, here we have the facade pipes. They're in really long crates. The facade pipes are quite long, 14, 15, 16 feet. So we actually took two of our 8-foot crates and took the ends off and butted them end to end so that we could get the long pipes in. All right, here's the 4-foot octave from the grate coming out and being packed up. You can see that longest pipe didn't quite fit, so they had to miter it a little bit to fit it in. Skinners are really dense, and often pipes are mitered or wrapped around or whatever to try to fit everything in. We're loading them into a crate, and the crates will go back to the shop, and all the pipes will be cleaned. The wooden pipes will be re-shellacked. Stoppers will be checked and fitted. You can see behind Steph is the base pipes for the grate diapason, and then you see some wooden pipes kind of behind that, and that's actually the base octave of the 16-foot trombone. Once in a while Skinner would use wooden resonators for the 16-foot and 32-foot octaves of the trombones. Here we are taking some of the biggest pipes out of the organ. This is the pedal open, and I think this is about low. B, maybe. They're all back in the chamber, and they have to come out one at a time. And the biggest ones, which we're getting into, weigh a couple 100 pounds. So this one right here, now this looks like C. No, this is tenor C. This is 8-foot C of the 16-foot open. So you can set it right on that railing if you need to. All right, we're getting into a routine here. Okay, whenever you're ready. What pitch is this, Holly?
Coming out is
All right, so this is A1 of the 16-foot. Still, we've got 10 more pipes that are bigger than this. All right, here it comes. Watch the light bulb, Alex. You okay, bud? Watch your step. Okay. Can you get that, Paul? Okay, maybe I should give my hand.
Okay.
You okay?
Yep.
All right, get off the step and then I'll... All right, good job. All right, I'm standing on the grate chest. All the pipe work is off. There's only a few pipes left in the organ. These large 16-foot open diapason pipes. You can see they go all the way up to the ceiling. That's low C sharp, and low C is right there. And then over here, you can see is the bottom octave of the 16-foot trombone. And you can see how the pipes are too tall to stand up in here. So they actually miter each pipe over. These couple in the middle are not mitered. And then as the pipes get bigger, they're mitered. This is low C sharp, and over here is low C. You can see that it's about 10 inches at the top, so that it's a very large scale. We've got a lot of the winding trunks out. There's some large winding trunks that have come out, and we're taking winding out of the lower swell division. You can see some of the winding trunks that still have to come out for the lower swell. Okay, this is the harp action, which we just loaded out of the upper choir division. And we've got it on our lift, and it's coming down to the main floor. And there it goes. You can see the harp action is actually in two sections. So this is the bass end, and the treble was set up on top. You can see these boards. It came down, and these boards, scab boards, right here, helped hold it together. You can see the harp action. we got to get that down next. And that's a bear. That's a big heavy piece. Okay, here I am at the organ chamber at Westminster Pres. The skinner is all out. We left the framework. You can see all the framework for the wind chests. We left that because the contractor can use that and lay planks across it to get the ceiling and the walls repaired and painted. You can see how the walls need quite a bit of work, and the ceiling in some cases is coming apart and coming down. So we're ready for the contractor. Parts are going back to the shop. We have the truck all loaded up, and we got to come back Monday morning. You can see the main wind chests, the two swell wind chests in the back, and then the choir and the great wind chest towards the front. Toe boards for the upper swell wind chest, the big swell wind chest. So I'm going to walk downstairs, and we can take a look at some of the parts downstairs, and then also take a look at the truck. We've got the console on the truck, and a whole bunch of the offset wind chests are going to go back, and we'll start rebuilding and re-leathering those offset wind chests. So I'm coming down the stairs into the narthex and hallway for the organ. So these are just crates of pipes. You can see them all here. There's a lot of parts still here. You can see there's one reservoir here. This might be the swell reservoir. And then there's the organ bench. That still has to go in. And so I'm gonna head out, and you can see the truck out here. It's pretty much full. It has the console, a bunch of wind chests, reservoirs, a lot of parts. So that's gonna go back to the shop today and be unloaded this afternoon. You can see parts in the back here. So we got one more truckload, and then the whole organ is out. All right. So we're going into the bottom enclosed division, which is the choir division, if I get the door open. And you can see the choir division in front of us. These two reeds are the French horn and the tuba, the high pressure reeds. And we're going to flip around to the side. And we're back behind the choir division. We've got the bottom octave of the 16-foot trombone. It's extended down from the great 8-foot tuba. So let's go back and take a look into the tower chamber. Let me get a light turned on. And this is the lower motor chamber. Oops, watch your step here. There's nice bright lighting. So we're in the blower motor chamber, and here's the blower fan. It's a turbine fan. It actually has 1, 2, 3 different blades, and the air comes in here. It has a spring-loaded intake. The motor's on the other side, and this is a Spencer turbine, American-made. And the motor is a Century motor. It's a 3-phase motor. And you can see that it blows air up to a large bellows right here. And in a minute, I'll turn the organ on, and you can watch that bellows inflate. And it has a secondary outlet that is higher pressure. And it blows to a smaller bellows. And there's a high pressure line it goes out and runs the tuba and the French horn and the two percussion stops, the harp and the chimes. They all require very high pressure. Wind pressure in an organ is measured by a wind manometer, how many inches of water. It's like a barometric manometer. And the high pressure stops in the organ run around 12 inches, and the lower pressure stops run on 5, 6, 7 inches. So, Jeff, if you want to wait right here, I'll go down and turn it on. You may want to try to get in and get a shot of the motor itself. It's a little hard to see. You can get around and kind of look down on it. But it's an old 3-phase Century motor. And Century is out of business. They went out of business, I think, in the 80s. But they made beautiful motors. And this motor is just a hair shy of 100 years old. But it just runs so nicely. It winds up quietly, and it's a very powerful motor. We had it refurbished by Auburn Armature, a motor company out in Auburn, New York. And it's just a really sweet running motor. It would be, if we're going to replace that motor, we'd probably pay $20,000 for a motor like that. It's really a beautiful motor. So let me go out and start it up. So Jeff, you want to stand clear of the motor and the intake housing, and you'll be able to see the reservoirs inflate, and you'll be able to hear the motor wind up. One of the things that we installed on it was a soft start circuit, and the soft start gives the motor, instead of letting all the current, all the electricity just go into the motor, and the motor tries to jump to attention, it actually trickles in the current and then builds it up so that the motor starts slowly and then winds up, which is much easier on the whole system. Here's the soft start circuit for the motor. You can see control circuit, plug and blower motor. And so we saw the motor start up, and the motor feeds out. The different reservoirs provide different pressure, and they feed out through this wind trunk. And this wind trunk actually has 3 cavities, 3 independent cavities. And one cavity goes out, it's a smaller cavity, and it's the high pressure cavity, and goes out, winds out through the organ, and feeds the high pressure stops. And then there's a lower pressure cavity, which is much bigger, and that feeds the bulk of the organ. And then there's a cavity down the middle that is actually an intake. And it takes warm air from the organ chamber and pulls it into the blower room. And we have a filter over that so that that air is all filtered. All right, so I'll come in here. Jeff, if you can get that. So in front of me is, as I mentioned before, is the bottom octave of the 16-foot tuba. And it plays from the pedal, but once we get up to pipe number 13, that actually plays in the great division as the 8-foot tuba. And I can demonstrate a few of those. It's a big, powerful sound, and I can actually, I think, get that to play. You can see it. I spoke too soon. Let me go to the console and play a few notes of that. Jeff, you stay right there. Brace yourself. It's loud. So that's one of the high pressure stops in the organ. Jeff, if you want to come out here, I'll switch places with you for a second. So you can see the wind lines, and here's the filter for the intake. And the wind line, the wooden wind line, comes down and goes across the back wall. You can see a little bit of it here in the corner. So we used a wooden wind line to distribute the air back along the back wall. And then we use all the old Skinner wind lines, which are metal wind lines, and we socket those with flanges off the wooden wind line. So we're in the back of the choir box. The choir box is plays from the bottom keyboard of the organ, the choir division, and it has expression shades on the front. We can go out and look at that in a little while. And you can see this is a 16-foot string, excuse me, a 16-foot dulciana. It's called it's a gamba, a 16-foot contragamba, and it plays in the choir at 16 foot. So we can see ranks of the choir here. The contragamba is here. The bigger pipes are on an offset chest. That was the chest we just saw. Often what Skinner did was he would take the biggest pipes and move them off to the side to be more efficient in how the space is filled. And the offsets would actually be played by lead tube actions. So the note would actually play on the main wind chest, and it would inflate air in these tubes, and each tube goes down to play a different note on the offset chests. So one thing we did was we had to retube the whole organ, which was quite a job. We are in the choir chest, so we talked about the contragamba. And then there is a gamba stop, a melodia stop. This is the melodia bass here, left here, Jeff. That has stoppers for the bottom octave. And then once we get up to pipe number 13 in the melodia, it goes to an open pipe with a flap on the top. We've got a dulciana, a 4-foot flute. I think it's called a flute d'amour. Let's see, yeah, you can see it's labeled. This is low C of the flute d'amour, the 4-foot flute, and it's a stoppered rank. They're very pretty ranks. And the flute d'amour, and then in front of that is the clarinet, and in front of that is the English horn. So the choir has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 independent stops. And I believe the contragamba does play in the pedal, but we can check that from the console. And the choir division all runs on about 7 inches of pressure. All right, so we're standing right in the middle of the choir division. You can see above us, actually, is the swell, and we can see some of the swell reservoirs and wind lines and action in the swell. the swell is quite a large division in this organ. But getting back to the choir, so we can see along the back wall the offset pipes, the tube offs, and that includes the bases of the contragamba, the gamba, and even in front of that, the bases, the bottom 12 notes of the melodia. And in front of it, we can see the wooden pipe, which is the melodia, and that goes to an open pipe. And then when we get up a little bit higher on that rank, it goes to a metal pipe. And the metal pipe is twice as long. It's an overblown pipe, what's called a harmonic pipe. So if I play it, let's see here, there are 3 small holes on the back of the pipe. So if I cover those holes, but with the holes in it, the pipe overblows, and it gives it a very imitative sound of a real concert flute. So it's actually 3 different ranks of pipes in one rank. The bottom octave is stoppered. The next octave, the next 2 octaves are open with a flap, and then the top 2 octaves are metal, and they're double length with the 3 holes cut in the back, and they're harmonic. And they blend all the sounds together to get a nice consistent sound from top to bottom. Skinners are almost voiced a little louder in the treble. The music that was played on Skinners was often solo in the right hand and accompaniment in the left hand, so that the right hand tends to be a little bit louder. The melody is all important in Skinner music. And, I'm sorry, music that Skinner's used for. All right, so now we're facing out. We can see that the choir shades are cracked open a little bit, and they can actually be opened and closed with a foot pedal like a gas pedal. So this is a very unusual stop. This is a harp stop, and the harp stop is a percussive stop. So it has pneumatics. We can see these pneumatics, and they inflate. And these have a pneumatic, and the pneumatic is a wedge-shaped pneumatic, almost like a fireplace bellows. And the pneumatic inflates and pulls on this hammer. And this is actually very similar to a piano hammer. And the piano hammer strikes a metal bar, and the metal bar has a wooden resonator underneath it. And the resonator is tuned, the length of it is sawed down to the right length. It's open on the bottom, and it actually helps the metal bar to vibrate and reinforces and resonates the sound. And because this is a striking action, it needs high pressure. So we have one reservoir that's down below us that's high pressure, and it feeds the harp action, it feeds the French horn, the front rank, and then it feeds the tuba, this rank. And this is the 8-foot tuba in the grate. These 2 stops, although they're located in the choir box, are actually stops for the grate. They're loud, so Skinner wanted to have them enclosed in the choir box so that you could mute them if you wanted to. All right, what else is interesting? So we can see the swell reservoir above our head. We can see the stop actions to turn the swell stops on and off. We can see all the original Skinner wind lines. Our goal in this was to restore and use absolutely as much as possible of the original Skinner and not to alter anything. So what you're seeing is all original. We even used leather similar to the original leather, and we used hide glue to glue everything together, which would have been historic and original. So we're looking back at the choir division and the wind chest that the choir pipes sit on. This is a Pittman wind chest, a chest that was designed by Skinner. He designed and patented the Pittman wind chest. And Pittman wind chests are very efficient. They're efficient in how they work. They're efficient. They're very quick and responsive. And the leather tends to last a long time in Skinner Pittman chests. The way they're designed, they preserve, and the leather is only stressed and flexed a minimal amount. So Skinner Pittman chests are still, even though this was designed in 1929, actually the Pittman chest was designed earlier in the teens. This Skinner wind chest is still, even though it's 90 years old, is still one of the most efficient and responsive chests manufactured. In front of the chest, we have a tremolo, and Skinner used exhausting tremolos, and there's a long wind line. This is actually, I believe, the swell tremolo. And there's a long wind line that goes out of the bottom of the tremolo across and up into the swell box. And let me turn it on. So inside this box, it has a big wedge bellows, and it actually dumps air. It dumps puffs of air. So it has a little oscillating device that opens and closes, and it dumps out puffs of air. It's sometimes called a dumping tremolo. And there's a big valve underneath. You can see the leather for that. All that leather is new. So it deflates and allows the tremolo to operate. And tremolos actually work best when they have a long wind line, when they're located farther away from the division. So that this wind line is purposely about 20 feet long, 22 feet long or so. And the reason why tremolos work best with a long wind line is because the air inside the wind line acts as a piston, and you get a piston effect, which tends to help the oscillation and also smooths out the tremolo. There's enough compression, enough flexibility in the air pressure in that long piston line that it gives a nice smooth tremolo sound. So a tremolo like this can operate very quietly and efficiently with this long line. And at the top of the line, where it connects to the reservoir, there's a gate valve that you slide open and close, and you can adjust how wide the tremolo is, how much it affects the pitch. And then there's also a device in the box itself where you can control the speed of the tremolo. All right, you can see a big wind line at the end of the choir box. That goes up and feeds into that's the wind line for the swell division, the upper division. And as I mentioned before, we have a large wooden trunk that goes on the floor across the back of the chamber, and all the Skinner wind lines flange into that wooden trunk. All right, the box of the tremolo. Now the organ, in its previous location, it was at the First Christian Science Church in downtown Syracuse on East Genesee Street. The organ was all located back in a chamber, so and it was behind curtains, so it didn't have a facade, and it didn't really have walls, freestanding walls or a case around the organ. So when we took the organ out, we had to manufacture walls that would imitate how Skinners were built. So these are all paneled walls that we made, and we copied the way the Skinner walls were designed in other Skinners that we've seen. So they're double thickness box and a very thick wall. You can see there was a little bit of the original Skinner wall, so we used that and imitated the dimensions and style of the wall. This is a frame panel with an external panel. Those are all the stops in the choir. I'll play a little bit of the French horn and the tuba, which are on your right there. The tuba is loud, so be ready. Okay, so as I mentioned before, the Skinner organ, which you can see the box and some of the pipes, were all packed back into a chamber, a room with plaster walls, and it had a curtain in front of it. So what we did was when we moved it here, we had to make new walls for the wind boxes, and we set up the organ, so part of it's on the floor in front of the stained glass window. And then we had part of an organ case from a previous organ. And the case is all white oak, quarter-sawn white oak, beautiful case. And we had the case refinished, and the case was actually quite a bit different. So we modified the case so that this central panel is all new. We built that. We had the two side panels, and we had a few bits and pieces of the central panel. So we modified the side panels and then built the central panel to fit in between. So some of the frame and panel work is work that we've done. You can see, for instance, this part is original, and then this part right here, you can see a little blue line there. This is new from this, from here over to that point is new. And so this is white oak pieces that we made to match in with the old panels. The woodworking is quite beautiful, and to duplicate all these pieces would be very expensive, and we were pleased that we had part of an old case that really fit in nicely with the Skinner style. Now, in most pipe organs, where there are organ pipes in the facade, usually some of those pipes, not all of them, but usually some of them are speaking pipes. But because the Skinner, in its old location, had no facade, the facade that we put up is a non-speaking facade. It's a dummy facade. And we had a number of old pipes in our inventory that we were able to modify to make this central panel. As I mentioned before, the two outer sections are original, and then the central panel is one that we added. The Skinner console, this is all original. And in a little while, I'll take some of the panels off the side and the back, and you can see into the Skinner console. It's a walnut console, and a beautiful old piece of furniture. And when we saw it in the Christian Science Church, it was pretty beat up. The organ bench was actually all cracked and broken, and we were able to manufacture. This is essentially a new organ bench with a few pieces from the old organ bench, and we used the pieces from the old organ bench as patterns to make a new organ bench in the Skinner style. The keyboards, if you want to come around here a little bit, Jeff. The keyboards are ivory, and ivory was outlawed, prohibited to bring ivory into the country. And then, I don't know, about 10 years ago, it was there was a law that was passed that said ivory could not be sold in any form. So anytime you buy a piano or keyboard instrument, what looks like ivory is actually probably some kind of plastic. And then the other thing that has come into fashion instead of ivory is I have seen keyboards covered with bone, cow bone, and they can clean the bone up. They boil it down to get all the impurities out of it, and then they can slice it up just like a piece of wood, and slice it up and polish it up. Now we were fortunate; most of the ivories were intact on this organ. There were a couple that were beat up and missing, and I did have, we do have an old inventory of ivories from previous keyboards. So I did cycle just a couple of ivories from an older keyboard and replaced ivories on this keyboard. And not only are the keys ivory, but the faces of the draw knobs are ivory, and the faces of the coupler tabs are ivory also. And then the black keys are ebony. They're ebony with a lacquer. And then you can see the pedal keys. The sharp keys are actually maple with an ebony cap, and it's all stained black. And let me turn a light on down there. I think we just got a switch to turn those on. There we go. So we put new maple caps on the natural keys. This is sugar maple, or real hard maple. And then the maple and ebony capped pedal keys. The maple is stained black. So it looks like it's all one piece of ebony, but it's just the top edge. It's ebony. And then it has ebony tipped toe studs. All right, so I'm standing in front of the great division. This division is played from the middle keyboard of the organ. Remember, the choir division, the previous division we were in, plays from the bottom keyboard. And the great division has a lot of metal pipes. Most of these are diapason pipes. And the diapason sound, the diapason pipes, are used primarily for hymn accompaniment. They're a sound that's kind of unique to the pipe organ and the real backbone sound in the organ. Again, some of the bass pipes from the great division are offset. There are actually 3 offset chests. And they use lead tubes which go down and underneath and operate each pipe when it's played from the console. I don't think you can see if the cardboard boxes are in the way, but there's another set of bellows underneath the great division. And we can work our way into the back here for a little while. So you can see the offset pipes. I think I can play a few of these right here. So there are actually 2 8-foot diapasons in this organ, a larger scale and a smaller scale. Let's see which is which here. So this is the bigger scale, so we can play some of this. Okay. Now we talked about that wooden box. That comes through the organ, and you can see where the Skinner lines are flanged off to the various divisions from the metal box. You can see a line over here. That's actually the high pressure line that feeds the tuba and the French horn and the harp stop. Okay, so we can see the expression shades. There's 2 banks on the bottom for the choir division, and I'll go open and close those. And then above is the swell division, and that's quite a large division. And that also has 2 banks of swell shades. So I'll go to the console. Jeff, why don't we change places here? I'll go to the console and work the shades, and you can actually see the expression motors as they open and close the shades. So we're going to open the choir shades first. So that's their maximum opening. And that's in the close division. And then open and close the swell So the expression motors, let me stand over here, Jeff. So the expression motors, and here's the one for the swell, they actually run on high pressure also. So this is a high pressure line that goes up into the bottom of the swell engine. And it has 16 collapsing pneumatics inside it. And each pneumatic is set in a row, and they're all hooked to a harness, almost like a dog sled. Sometimes it's called a whiffle tree. And you can imagine that what happens is each pneumatic, when it collapses, pulls on the harness, pulls the linkage a little bit, so each one fires in order. You get 1, 2, 3 through 8, and then 9 through 16. And they each pull just a little bit at a time. So when you quick run through and fire all the stages, and it's operated from what looks like a gas pedal at the console, when you run through all the stages, it opens and closes it in 16 different increments, which gives you a nice change in dynamic. You can close the box tightly or open it up almost 75 or 80 degrees. One of the modifications we had to make to the Skinner organ was that the shades originally closed and opened like this, so that what that would have done if we had put it in like it was originally, instead of angling the sound out into the sanctuary, it would have angled the sound out against the stained glass window, and it would have been much softer. So what we ended up doing was taking the shades and the frames that they're in, taking each shade frame and flipping it upside down. And we had to install a special bearing in the bottom, because the bearing, which was on the bottom of the shades as the shades flipped, was on the top. So we had to install a new bearing on the bottom of each shade, and then redo all the linkages and the traces, so that instead of working the shades to open like this, it's actually working the shades to open as they do now. And it turned out to be a lot of engineering to use the old Skinner parts and engines and linkages and get them all set up so that they opened in the right direction. If you look closely at the front of the shades, you can see where the old linkages were screwed on. So one of the things we did to allow us to use the old linkages once it was flipped upside down was we had to relocate where the linkages attached to the front of the shades. You can see a lighter mark with 2 screw holes where the old linkages were attached. The part that screws right to the front of the shade is called a lug, L-U-G. So we had to take the lugs and relocate them all to different locations on the shade to get the linkages along the side to all line up. But it's a nice system, very efficient. And because the shades are very thick and the boxes, the wooden walls of the boxes are very thick, we can actually play a loud sound, turn on a lot of stops, pull out all the stops, play big chords, and shut the shades, and it really closes down on the dynamic. And then we can peek the shades open and get this big burst of sound that comes out, something really desirable in symphonic or romantic music. So, you know, it took a lot of engineering, re-engineering, to incorporate all these old parts and get them to work in a different direction and get them all to work efficiently. But we are pleased the way it turned out. The Skinner uses, as we talked before, it's a Pitman chest, and it's an electropneumatic action. So when you sit at the console and play the keyboards, you're actually working switches. There are wires, contact wires, finger wires underneath each keyboard and behind each draw knob. And so when you sit down and play a key or a pedal or work the shades, essentially what you're doing is you're making or breaking switches. And those signals all come out to a junction board here. So what we did was we weren't able to, and we didn't want to use the old Skinner wiring. It was all cotton covered wiring, and it tends to get old and brittle, and it was adapted for the chest in a certain position. So one of the things that we did not preserve in from the old Skinner was the old wiring, and we rewired everything, and we used telephone cable wiring. It's a narrow gauge wiring. I think it's 18 gauge or 20 gauge, and it's all PVC coated, and it's all color coded. So you can see each one of these is a gang, a wire with I think 50 notes each, and they're pulled in and wired in, and then so we have a big harness. It's about 3 inches thick of wires that comes from the console and gets pulled into the bottom, and then out of the top, gets pulled in from the bottom, and then we have another set of wires that comes out and goes to each individual wind chest. So we, during the restoration, we took off all the old wiring and cleaned off all the old solder joints, and then we wired into a modern plug-in unit so that we can unplug divisions, and wired into all this big junction board system with the plug-ons. And everything's labeled so that we know what particular contact plays what particular note, and so on. And to help us sort everything out, we put together charts, and this tells us, cable number 1 has what particular notes. So cable 1, cable 2, cable 1 has the bass tuba, and then part of the Lieblich-Gedicht for the first 50 notes. And then the next 50 notes has the rest of the Lieblich-Gedicht, and the first 19 notes of the harp, etc. Okay, now behind you, Jeff, is the pedal division. And the pedal division has essentially 2 independent stops, and then several stops that are borrowed. So this pedal division was all originally crammed in a separate organ chamber from the rest of the organ. And we took those out and took all the pipes out. And some of the pipes are stoppered, some of the pipes are open. You can see, for instance, this one is open, and you can see originally in its other chamber, it was a little bit too tall to fit into the chamber. So Skinner's company took the pipes and cut the tops off and mitered them over. So you can see it's mitered over and it's open at the top. And there's a board that's nailed across the top, and that is actually the tuning board. So what we do when we tune it is I climb up there on a ladder, and I have the guys play the notes, and then I take that board and I move it around and cover and uncover the top of the pipe, and that affects the tuning. And when I get it so that it's in tune, I nail it into place so that that particular pipe, that open diapason, gets tuned maybe once every 40 years or something like that. It produces such a low frequency that the tuning is not as noticeable if it's a little bit out of tune. Now behind it, you can see this is low C. Jeff, you may want to step back in there, maybe back in there, you'll get a better perspective. So this is low C of the 16-foot, of the 32-foot Borden. So you can see the pipe goes up to the top. Now, a Borden pipe is stoppered. So although it produces a 32-foot pitch, it actually is only about 20 feet long. One of the things that impresses me so much when I work on these old Skinners is not only how well things are made, but also the quality of the materials. And to find a big, clear, beautiful piece of pine like that, it's 20 feet long and almost a foot and a half wide, is unusual these days. Such beautiful lumber that they used throughout the organ. A lot of the wood in the organ is what they called sugar pine, and it's very tightly grained and really nice quality wood. And he used big, thick pieces of it, so you can see that this wood is about 1.5 inches thick, and so this piece is about 1.5 inches thick and about 18 inches wide. I think closer to 16 inches wide and 20 feet long. So you can imagine the tree that came out of. Quite really beautiful lumber. Let me play that. I don't know whether your camera will be able to pick up that pitch. It's a very low pitch. You almost feel it more than you hear it. But let me go back to the console and play that. I'm in the Great Division, and I'll climb up through past the Great Pipes on either side of me, and climb up the ceiling. And open the door to the swell box. All right, so we're in the swell division. This division is played from the upper keyboard in the organ. This is quite a large swell division. And you can see on the back wall the chimes, and there are hammers that reach and strike each individual chime. I can climb up and strike one for you. So there are chimes in the back, and offset is a 16-foot narrow-scaled Borden, what's called a Lieblich gedeckt, a lovely gedeckt. And then in front of that are a couple of very slightly tapered stops, and they're metal, and they're the flute dolce and the flute dolce celeste. And then in front of that is a metal chimney flute. It's a stop metal flute. The stopper has a little hole in it, and the hole goes right down through into the pipe, and so it forms a little chimney. And the sound is kind of a sweet sound, and a little brighter than a normal stopped pipe. There's a 4-foot Violino in front of that. That's the stop I use as my tuning stop. And then in front of that is an 8-foot trumpet. It's actually called a cornopian. And then in front of me is the oboe. It has a double taper and tends to have a little more nasal sound. And then in front of that is an interesting and unusual stop that Skinner used in a lot of his pipe organs. It's called a vox humana. It's designed to actually imitate the human voice. There's a 4-rank mixture in front of that, and it's not a standard Germanic mixture. It's has tierces in it, so it's a much more nasal sound, designed to be added to the chorus to give it a little more bite and a little more of nasal sound. In front of that is kind of an unusual stop. I've seen them in Skinner organs and also in molars, but I think Moeller copied Skinner on this. This is what's called a flute triangulaire. You can see why it's called triangular. It's actually three walls that are glued together. And the theory behind it is that the mouth is 1/3 of the circumference of the pipe. So it has a lot of mouth per the size of the pipe, and it's designed to produce more tone. And they design them and put them in here and stack them in there very efficiently using the triangular sound. It's an open flute sound, again, and you tune it by pushing the flap up and down. Incidentally, you can see that all the pipes are fitted with collars. With Skinner, he would fit the collars on pipes, but then in the trebles, he didn't use collars. He made the pipes a little bit overlong, and then would use a special tool called the coning tool to flare out the top of the pipe a little bit, or turn the cone tuner around and flare the top of the pipe in a little bit. You do that by hammering on the top of the pipe with the tool. And it's very stable. Once you get it in tune, it tends to stay well in tune. But in a temperature environment like Syracuse, where the temperature changes drastically from season to season and affects the tuning, you're always trying to retune these treble pipes to accommodate for the temperature changes. And because you hammer on the pipes, it beats up the pipes. So we made a decision to eliminate the cone tuning and put slide tuning on all the treble pipes. So none of the pipes have the original tuning sliders. So you can see as you come up the scale, these are the original sliders. And then at this point, for the treble pipes, the tallest treble pipes, you can see we fitted them with new sliders. And these are actually stainless steel sliders. They're very springy, they're very thin and light, but they're very springy. And they won't corrode like the original Skinner sliders did. All right. I don't know whether there's much else in here that we need to see. So one of the problems we had to deal with was there was this great huge stained glass window, and it's very cold at the window. So what we did was we built panels, and you can kind of see them behind the pipes. So the panels are held in with turnbuckles, so that if we need to service the windows or the lights at the windows, we can actually take these pipes out, set them aside, and then remove the panels. All the panels have handles on them, and we can remove these panels. The panels are made of insulated material, has wood and wood with insulation in the middle, so that this room will stay a little bit warmer and not be as affected by the windows. All right, I think that's about it for up here there. Okay, so this is the Skinner console. You can see that it is just dense with mechanism. These are all pneumatic motors that turn stops on and off and work combinations. They're operated by little magnets which exhaust a pouch which operate various pneumatics. And so these work what's called the combination system. You can pre-program stops to come on with a push of a button. It's essentially a very basic binary computer that's all done with these big electromechanical devices. And then across the back, there are pneumatics that operate. Let's operate one here. So you can see how that comes up and down and turns on various stops at the console. Let's operate one of the reversers. Come on around here and take a look at one of these, Jeff. Here, you can shoot right down in here. So let me find where that, I think, is this it? Yep. So this is a reversing stop. What happens is it's designed to turn a stop on, the pneumatic inflates, and it turns a stop on, and then it swings. It has a logic built into it, so it swings to a different location in the on position, so that when you hit it again, it turns the stop off. It's designed to reverse each time, and it's all done with this pneumatic, the spring return, and this system that returns to a different location and turns the stop on and off. A very clever system, not something you'd see nowadays. You can see the stop automatically coming on and off. And then across the back are gangs of pneumatic switches, and each switch actually has a whole set of finger contacts, so that when you operate a particular stop, let's see if I can find one. I can't, but what happens is air comes up through the lead tube and inflates this long pneumatic, and the pneumatic swings into position, and all these finger contacts, one for each key on the keyboard or the pedal board. So there might be 61 different contacts on there. Swing into place and make connections and turn on a particular stop. So that those are all operated from the console when you're sitting at the console. But you can see that this is very dense, very complicated, and we restored the whole thing. So you can see that, for instance, all the pneumatics have new leather covering, all the bushings, all the little valves. These are all new leather valves that seat very tightly now, and we're quite involved in taking this apart and restoring it all. As I mentioned before, the case was really beat up. So we not only had to restore everything, we actually took all the guts of the console out and then refinished the case. We have a gentleman who comes in and does that work for us, a professional finisher. His name is Phil Berrigan. And Phil comes in and takes the parts back to his shop and strips them all down and refinishes them. So it was a big job. There were some broken molding pieces that we had to repair. As I mentioned before, the bench is essentially a new bench. It's all been rebuilt with new parts using the old bench's patterns. Get that all refinished, get it all back together, get all the guts back into it, the restored parts, and then get all of that calibrated and working right. It's quite a job. So we ended up spending almost a year on this job doing the restoration work.